Presented by Christy, Andrew and Christina.
Here's some quick facts about Syria. Where Syria is located? It was located in the continent of Asia. Syria, Arab Republic cover 183,630 square kilometers of land and 1,550 square kilometers of water, making it the 89th largest nation in the world. So how actually the Syrian war started? It was actually began when the anti-government demonstration began in the March of 2011, part of the Arab Spring. But the peaceful protests quickly escalated after the government's violent crackdown and armed opposition groups began fighting back. By July, army defenders had loosely organized the Free Syrian Army, and many civilian Syrians took up to join the opposition. Division between secular and religious fighters and between ethnic groups continued to complicate the politics of the conflict. More than 5 years after it began, the war has killed over 250,000 people, half of whom are believed to be civilians. Bombings are destroying crowded cities, and horrific human rights violations are widespread. Syria's civil war has created the worst humanitarian crisis of our time. Half of the country's pre-war population, more than 11 people, have been killed or forced to flee their homes. Families are struggling to survive inside Syria or make a new home in neighboring countries. Others are risking their life on the way to Europe, hoping to find acceptance or opportunity. On a harsh winter and a hot summer make life as a refugee even more difficult. At times the effect of the conflict can seem overwhelming. Have you wondered what the difference between a human right and a civil right? After all, if some Americans had to fight to obtain civil rights as recently as the late 20th century, what are all of the human rights we and other nations are enforcing in other countries through military action? Is there a difference between the two terms? Human rights are generally thought of as the most fundamental rights. That include the rights to the life, education, protection from torture, free expression, and fair trial. Many of these rights blend into civil rights, but they are considered to be a necessity of human existence. As a concept of human rights, we are conceived shortly after World War II, particularly in regard to the treatment of the Jews and other groups of Nazis. In 1948, the United Nations General Assembly adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, cementing their foundation in international law and policy. Civil rights, on the other hand, are those rights that enjoyed by virtue of citizenship in a particular nation or state. In America, civil rights have the protection of the United States Constitution and many state constitutions. Civil rights protect citizens from discrimination and grant certain freedom like free speech, due process, equal protection, the right against self-incrimination, and so forth. Civil rights can be thought of as the agreement between the nation, the state, and the individual citizen that they govern. In an international framework, civil rights differ from the constitution or law of each country, while human rights are considered universal to all human beings. As a result, international players are less likely to take action to enforce a nation's violation of its own civil rights, but more likely to respond to human rights violations. While human rights are universal in all countries, civil rights vary greatly from one nation to the next. No nation may rightfully deprive a person of a human right, but different nations can grant or deny different civil rights and liberty.
When Americans were asked whether or not they believed the United States should provide refuge to people fleeing war and oppression, 52% stated that we should. 21% stated that we should not provide refuge. Democrats overwhelmingly stated that they would like to allow entry into the United States, while 13% didn't. In addition, independents and Republicans decided. In addition, the majority of independents and Republicans also believe that Syrians should be allowed into the United States. In addition to the majority of Americans believing the United States should allow more Syrians into the United States, 44% of Americans said the U.S. should allow the same or more Syrians into the country, while only 30% said that the United States should not allow, while only 30% said the United States should let in fewer Syrians. However, it is important to state that the results of these polls vary depending on where and when and who takes the polls.
According to statistics, Germany comes first for Syrian refugee resettlement since November 2014. They have received about 20,000 refugees in Germany, and second comes with Australia. We have about 5,600 Syrian refugees settled in their country.
If we look at the report published by Germany, their crime rates are soaring. One example on the report that Germany shows for the percent of crimes committed by non-Germans that stands out to me is the number of pickpocketing and purse snatching. It's over double the amount committed by illegal migrants or asylum seekers than it is by Germans. And that leads me to believe that they're being placed in countries where they have no education, they have no skills, they don't know the language, and they're resulting to petty crimes. Not to mention the drug offenses are over 4 times more committed by illegal migrants and asylum seekers than Germans. Robbery is 4 times higher, and homicide is over 4 times higher as well. The number of total offenses for Germans to non-Germans is a staggering difference and a staggering increase by illegal migrants and asylum seekers.
So, what can you relate with the theory that we learned in the class with this case?
Well, I think from the human rights side, you can apply standing for something to this situation. I think it's important that the United States stands for the rights of Syrian refugees. The U.S. consistently throughout history has tried to play a peacekeeping role in the world. I think this is an opportune moment to make a real difference in the life of people. I think the ethical thing to do in the situation is for the U.S. to accept these people into the country, stand for the Syrians as well as Americans, and just attempt to improve the quality of life of the Syrians just in general.
I can understand your points, and I think they're wonderful points to have. The first thing that struck me is when you said you wanted to improve the rights of the Syrian refugees. And standing for something, as an American, I would like to stand for our rights as Americans. Our Americans that need their situations improved, the homeless, the veterans, the jobless. I also feel that as much as we facilitate a peacekeeping role in the world, we should not neglect our own first. We should take care of ours first. We grow up to respect the flag. We grow up to understand that flag represents our freedom and the men that have fought for it. And we've come to take for granted the country that provides our protection. And protecting people from terrorist threats is our highest priority, to save our own people, to protect our own people.
I agree with that. Do you think that there would be anything that we could stand for the Syrians? Like, do you think it would be at all beneficial to bring them here, or should we focus our efforts on going overseas and possibly standing for something over there and try and improve their situation at home instead of bringing them here?
I do see that as an option as well. Not only do they need someone to help fight for them and help stand up for their rights, at the same time, we have an economy that is not working for all of our people now at this point in time. So taking those refugees and bringing them into our country where we may or may not have the room for those people would that increase their situation? Would that better their situation, or would that just be transplanting them into another situation that is not beneficial for them either?
Like our idea of state of nature, that kind of thing, is that?
Well, we have the
It's
social
sorry.
contract theory, but we've got the social contract, and the social contract is what we would like to get from our government, and one of those is protection. One of those is our way of life right now. Bringing those people in here, they would need many more resources that we can't provide to all of our citizens right now. So would it be better to provide services in their country so that they can stay in their homes? And I do understand that their number one priority is not to come to the United States. They would rather be at home with their family in their homeland. So it's not as I want to keep them out. I think our social contract should protect our citizens, and we do have a right, we should be going over there. We should be taking care of them. We should be helping them in every way we can. I don't know that there is a right answer. I know that it needs to be discussed. I know that this is a problem that's not going away. Like it or not, this is the situation in most of the world right now, and most of the world has a problem with refugees. Mm-hmm. So we do need to sit down and find a solution to the problem. Is it bringing them here? Is it taking them there? Is it moving them to another location? I have no idea.
Yeah, and you touched on social contract theory for a second, and I think that's something that's really interesting with this case. One thing I question, being in support of the Syrian refugees, is whether or not they would be able to kind of integrate into our social contract in the United States. Would they follow laws and, pay taxes, and would they, just become like an average American citizen? I'd like to be optimistic and say yes, that they could. I don't know if you have anything you'd like to say about that, but I think the social contract theory is just a really important point for whether or not it would work out. If they came here, of course they'd have to abide by the social contract of the United States, or else it wouldn't be successful for us or for them.
And you pointed out a really good fact that, would they want to? They're from a very different culture, a very different way of life, very different rules and laws.
That's a good point.
Would they even want to? They're not choosing to come here. They're fleeing from their dangerous situation. They're not necessarily wanting to become an American. They just want safety.
Okay.
So would they, could they, are they willing? I don't know. Would you like to get transported to another country where you don't speak the language? Your values are totally different. The laws are totally different. You can't crack a beer up, and drink back and watch a football game because drinking is illegal. Yeah, they might not even necessarily know how to abide by our social contract here because it's just so completely different. Completely different.
If they're in a whole other side of the world than us. I understand that one.
So Andrew, which theory that you think that support the most in human rights?
What theory could support standing for human rights the most? That's a tough one. I think the standing for something is definitely one of my main point of why I think we should let them in. But other than that, I think you can apply virtue to the situation, in the way Aristotle thinks about it. I think, Aristotle says virtues are ways of thinking that help us ascertain what to do in particular circumstances. I think that to be a wholesome country, I guess, Americans should accept Syrians, not only because it is the moral and virtuous thing to do, but because it is definitely important to build positive habits of helping other people. And virtues aren't something that just appear, they're something that come from habit. And I think if we want to have a relationship with the rest of the world on or with Syrians in a positive light, I think it's important that we build positive habits of helping people in need. And I think that includes allowing Syrians entry into the United States, especially because if we want other countries to, do the same thing for us when we're in the same situation, I think it's important that we start building the good habits right now and support them while we can.
I could say you're a very virtuous person. You're very open-minded, patient, responsible, friendly, lots of character traits that would categorize a virtuous person. So in the same breath then, are you calling me an unvirtuous person because I don't share those same qualities in this situation, that my goal is to keep my family safe? And does that classify me, would I be an unvirtuous person because I don't see the same way? Because I feel there's mitigating circumstances, like the safety, the terrorists that are being embedded that we have read about, that they are placing them in these groups of refugees to destroy us, to destroy anyone that doesn't think like them. So knowing that, am I unvirtuous for wanting to keep my country safe?
I honestly think that's a really good point. I think that's one of the reasons why this topic is so hard to even take a side on. I don't know. I don't think I'd be able to call you unvirtuous. I think as far as like reading this and just applying it completely objectively, I guess yes, but in my personal opinion, I don't think you are unvirtuous by saying that you wouldn't let them in. I think I can completely understand why you would be concerned with the protection of yourself and your family and your kids, but at the same time, I guess I'm trying to see the Syrian side of it and the protection of the Syrians and their families and their kids. I think it is virtuous to protect them just as we would protect ourselves.
And I can appreciate that. The one difference between us is I have a child. Mm-hmm. I have a child that is out of the home, grown, and I have a child that is in my home. And when I see articles in Newsweek, when I see articles in the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, and they're quoting Islamic State commanders stating that we, quote, have sent many operatives to Europe within the refugees. Some of our brothers have fulfilled their missions, but others are still waiting to be activated. All I can do is think about my children and think about those people that are embedded in these groups in my hometown, at my child's school.
So, how can you relate to utilitarianism also?
From the human rights side, I think the biggest point that you can pull from utilitarianism is doing the greatest good for the greatest number of people. There's something like, it's roughly 5 million Syrian refugees that are trying to leave the country and trying to better their lives. I think clearly the greater good is helping Syrians personally, or I should say, I think personally the greater good is helping 5 million Syrian refugees. I don't think it's ethical to put American citizens over the Syrian refugees.
And I agree, that's a large number of refugees that need help, that need our help. But again, my thoughts are for the almost 319 million Americans that come to rely on our civil rights for protection, for our way of life, for our greater good. So is the greater good for your 5 million refugees going to trump the safety and the security of my almost 319 million Americans?
I think that is a great question, and I think that is basically the epitome of why this whole conversation is so tough and why it's so hard to pick a side and why I've tried to advocate for the Syrian refugees. And I know you are still open on what side you want to choose, and I'm still open on what side I want to choose. But for the sake of discussion, I think we did find some good points and a good middle ground and kind of a jumping off point of where we can go from here. Do we help them or do we not? Because of course, outside of this discussion in this debate, we do care about Syrians, we do care about people, but it is a very tough situation.
I agree, and I see your points, and you're right. I'm on both sides. One thing I think we can both agree on is that this is the new norm in our society. This is not a problem that's going away, and this is something that needs to be addressed, thought about, and we need to come up with some solutions instead of taking sides. I know we were taking sides for this debate, but I think that makes two losers, and that in order to get a winning solution, we have to actually take into account both sides and create a solution for everyone involved.